Hi everyone. So I didn't get into YC, but I did get into the interview and got an email telling me that the reason I didn't get in was the solution I had created was too easy to replicate by our competitors. What we'd created was a router that could drop cost by 48% while only increasing latency by about 60 milliseconds. And we were told that Open Router or Flex or Portkey or Light LM could easily implement a good enough version of our solution. And so we weren't that big of a layer of better, and we didn't have customers. And last year I got top 10%, but not interview. And that was a memory platform that could take in Google Docs, Slack, and your code base and parse it really well so that agents could traverse it really easily and find answers quickly. I thought I would list out all the reasons why we didn't get into YC, also why our startups failed, and then going forward, anyone that's applying or building a startup could use these. So, one, just because it's a need doesn't mean that you can get the customer. And there's two factors here, right? What you're building needs to be needed, not wanted. And then what you're, and like, I guess it also needs to be wanted. Ideally, your customer knows they need this and they want it, not just that they know the pain exists. And then, you also need to be able to get in contact with the customer. So with Autodocs, the problem was that yes, it was token efficient, and now there's a lot of a lot of companies in this space trying to build this like point in time of your company snapshot. However, we had initially been trying to solve like an onboarding problem, and so there was no like clear like savings on cost or increase in revenue we could attribute, and so it was really hard to sell. We were also trying to sell like four different features at once. We weren't trying to sell one big thing, and then addition like so we didn't know what people actually wanted. No one really cared about making onboarding better. That's why onboarding platforms don't exist right now, even non-AI onboarding platforms. Like they do, but not at like the scale that we're thinking. And then this time around we had one product we were selling, a router that you set a deadline and it would find cheaper inference within that time and it would give that to you. And that's how it did that, like 48% cost reduction for 20% latency or 60 extra milliseconds. However, we initially started selling to startups. Startups eventually didn't need us because Claude Code and Codex plans were giving them 10x API credits for the dollar amount. And so they didn't need frontier technology on a router because they could just spin up these Claude Code plans or Codex plans. And so the only customers we could get would be like huge enterprise, which you either need contacts in or you need a lot of capital to go through advertisements, be able to support yourself so you can go to workshops and all these different like locations to actually meet these people in person, which we didn't get into YC. And so we can't get that capital right now. There are other ways we can get that capital, but also we don't have these contacts. We'd have to build them from the ground up. So one, you need to build something people want, people need, and have a way to contact the customer. Second, if you look at the market, when a company saves a dollar, their like stock goes up a little amount. But if the company increases their revenue by a dollar, so the profit margin changed the same amount, but they increase the revenue by a dollar, then the stock increases by 3x. Not like the whole stock price, but basically the market rewards revenue to cost as 3 to 1. And when you're selling, it's the same way. And so it was much harder to sell saying like, hey, we're a cost saving platform than to say we're a revenue generating platform. And so both of these tools, Autodocs and Flex Inference, for both cost savings, but ideally you want to be on the revenue generating side. Actually, like ideally you want to be on the profit side. You want to decrease cost and increase revenue. Cost savings for the Autodocs was, oh, we're going to like integrate all these platforms like inherently, and then we're going to build this like extra tool that now everything will contact. That just makes it so that there's n amount of tools and then plus one, which is our tool. However, what you'd ideally want is the harness that's already doing all your coding to be able to integrate with all these tools and not to need an extra tool. And you know what that ended up being? MCP servers and comments and code bases. And that's exactly how the world turned out. All these memory platforms, not as great as just a bunch of markdown docs sitting inside your Git repo. And that's it. Like sitting inside Git or like version control so you can like see how your code base has changed, but also just a bunch of markdown docs and MCP servers. on the side of flex inference, well, there's the argument to be made that like any router can easily be broken if someone just decides to change their API surface, like and messages just stops accepting extra parameters or changes how their configuration between messages to responses works or whatever. However, what's kind of more important here is that cost savings as a layer on someone else's tool is kind of broken, because what you're going to end up having is a case where they're incentivized to drop their costs, either to increase their own profit margin or just to give that back to the customer. And so unless you're building something that is like 10x bigger, in most cases you will be eaten up in software, especially since creating software is getting cheaper. And like, hey, we're going to decrease costs isn't like that big of a leap for a PM to make. This is specifically the case though when you're working with against a company, or like with a company that is moving fast. At the end of the day, if you're moving with a company that's moving very slowly, you're actually not competing with a company, you're competing with some junior PM, which is not the biggest deal. However, if you're moving against a big company or like a very fast, very smart company, then it can be a problem. Fourth, this time, so Autodoc started, it was fully created. Then we tried to sell and we couldn't figure out how to sell to big customers. We had some in the pipeline, but it was just taking so long to get them, and they just wanted to be in a bunch of meetings, which Paul Graham says is a sign that they're not going to sign. And he also says to like just go after startups and like medium-sized businesses, like Series C, Series B businesses, and not like enterprise scale. You can get them later. But this time we started with startups. However, they were not willing to pay right away or like try testing right away. They would rather choose like the free version or have some sort of idea around that. I forgot who said this, but he's like this $100 million founder now. He's not Alex Hermosi. And he mentioned that you should start with finding design partners, get them to help you figure out what kind of product to make, and then ask them to be your initial like beta testers, paid, almost like a kick funder, but like or kick fund, but like they are the ones that are like helping give you initial capital, and it's not giving away equity. So I think I'm going to try to do that next time. I did come to understand that engineers only buy from you if you can prove you're better, which is like faster, cheaper, or more reliable by a large margin, and are easy to use. So we tried to do that with Flex Inference. We were just as fast as Open Router. However, we had like the extra parameter you could set and make us a little slower, but we were significantly cheaper, like half your bill gone. And we were extremely reliable just because like I have a Amazon training, like the way we are operationally excellent is like very high end. And we were easy to use. You just changed your API URL and we accepted every API surface. Or they have to respect you. So all my initial customers came from people that actually respected me as an engineer or as an operator, not from people who just like I just was initially contacting. No one from there like actually tried us out. I did this towards the end once I brought my co-founder in and we were getting closer to the YC startup like deadline, like the application deadline. However, what I realized then was it was so much better is don't try to build a bunch of things at once. Have like a million harnesses or agents spawned up trying to do a billion features at once. Just tackle this next biggest blocker from a customer paying you every step of the way. And had I done that, I could have moved the iteration cycle from a month and a half to probably a week. Like the first thing my customer wanted was a router that could take chat completions and responses and messages. I made Converse and better stream content and generate content, or like generate stream content and and generate content, and like so many different API surfaces, and needed the integrations. Useless. No one was using those things. Then it was like trying to integrate with like a bunch of different models and get open source models and all these kind of things. What was really needed was they use Gemini and Vertex model or Claude models. They have Vertex. They need Vertex support. They needed Anthropic support, and I should have just started with that. Even though it makes no sense, like why aren't you supporting Gemini, a Google AI Studio directly? Why are you supporting it only through Vertex? That's fine. It's easy to integrate later, or easy enough. But the first step forward was to try to get money from their pocket into ours, and I spent too much time focusing on other things that costed other like issues, or like securing my pipeline. Like it's just me coding, or like securing like our branches or adding like paging alarms and all that. Like, why do I need all that stuff? If something breaks, my customer has my has my phone, has my text or my phone number. He can just text me. um, I did not need to do all that. I learned a lot during that, but that's not how a company is built. um, Owning an audience is more powerful when creation is cheap. This is just something I'm toying around with, but I think it might be true. Naval Shrikant said that like you should either go after uh, developing like build something or sell. Like you just need to know how to build and sell. And in the case of um, software becoming cheap, you either need to go upscale and go to hardware, or where it's still hard, no pun intended, and then or you need to build a like a marketing like loop, and ideally that is going to be. It depends on what you're selling, B2C or B2B. B2B is going to be educational based. B2C is it could be like swung both ways, but regardless, you're going to want to build some sort of personal brand. That also usually outperforms a business brand. Um, let's see. However, creation is more valuable when product is undeniable. So ChatGPT didn't market itself really that much, but it was like 100x. Even ChatGPT 3 was like 100x big better than so many alternatives in like LLM or like AI world, and like at least 10x better than Google search. And so it didn't have to market itself; it just went viral. So if you build something like that, then you don't have to worry as much as about marketing. But things like this compound. Like if you make a 10x product and then you make a 10x like marketing channel, you don't get like 100x or 20x. You sometimes get like 1,000, 100,000x. And I haven't seen many people do this that well. However, I did see Alex Hermosi build a extremely good pipeline for marketing and personal brand and all that, and then at the same time make a really really good book. And his book became the most selling book of all time, I think, or like most selling nonfiction book of all time. That is a huge deal, and like the TAM for book is very small. But think about all the downstream effects of that book, of like investment opportunities that he's gonna get, and this guy just made like after like 3 years, he probably just pulled in like $10 billion in long term value. Um, the router that I was building and Autodocs, I just need stronger conviction in my own product. Something that doesn't bore me after it's built. Often I find that once I build something, I get bored of it and I just want to like open source it and move on. And I might open source Flex Inference, although all of it is free for BYOK, and that would be what open source is. In fact, it's better than open source because even infra is running for free for everyone. Um, so we'll see. Like it just generally, like I don't know if stronger conviction is me not getting bored or me just getting to the point where I can actually sell. Um, we talked about this earlier, but don't productionalize before you need to. I started bringing in internationalization that slowed down the pipeline so much. I added like bot reviewers, and like I built my own open source platform that could like review my PRs using my codex plan spun up in a container, and that could review it. Was it really cool, and will it be helpful in the future? Yes, but was it needed then? Not really. Was internationalization needed when I had like no customers? Not really. um, do what's the obvious next step and just do it. You guys all should read this book. It's like 40 pages, 30 pages. It's called Obvious Atoms. The whole gimmick of the whole book is just do the obvious thing. Be clear, be concise, and tell the truth, the whole truth. And that is all that there is to marketing. Um, Commission based offers are the best. So if you like, originally Flex Inference was like, we will take 20% of your savings and nothing else. We won't charge 5.5% or 10% or whatever on your like managed keys or whatever. That was for BYOK. Once managed keys came out, we had like upfront costs, we had like payment processing and all that. So I had to switch it to 10% flat fee. But 20% commission based was actually like really easy to sell. And that's how we actually got the initial customers that did trust me, but the ones to even like say like, you know what, we would actually pay for this, to be willing to. And they were moving like $100,000 in inference cost a month. Um, and then ideally, if you're going to go into software, try to get product market fit over a weekend. Like I think it's like pretty much doable. Like Airbnb started as a Google form and a mattress in their living room. That's like a very common case. But like even when you're selling something harder, just like start contacting people up front and then just try to sell to them um, like as quickly as possible. Um, but yeah, like sell to them something into the future and then kick fund. Other than that, I think those are my all my notes. But hopefully this helps you guys and helps me in the future from making the same mistakes when applying to YC, or actually ideally making a startup in a business. Like YC will invest in you if you make a good business. Don't like aim for YC. Aim for a good business and YC will come. Thanks.